Hi, I'm Dubba. I'm the director of Music Tech Fest, and this is the MTF podcast. Now, if you're looking for a line of work that brings together art and science, the hands-on craft of the maker and the intellectual insight of the physicist, you want it to be glamorous, but you also want to get your hands dirty. You want to create exquisite objects, but then smash them, blow them up, or set them on fire. Ian Hunter has the job you're after. He's an award-winning special effects supervisor. He makes miniatures and models for, well, let me name a few movies you might have heard of. The Abyss, Blade Runner, Batman Returns, Edward Scissorhands, Alien Resurrection, Godzilla, X-Files, Pitch Black, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, X-Men The Last Stand, Bad Boys 2, Spider-Man 3, Die Hard 4, Fast and Furious 5, Night at the Museum, I Am Legend, The Incredible Hulk, Dark Knight, Watchmen, Green Lantern, Inception, Interstellar, First Man. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of his 70 or so Hollywood films to date. 16 Oscar nominations, 2 wins. I was lucky enough to sit down with Ian in a little chapel in Scotland, where our story kind of begins. Here's Ian Hunter. So Ian, you make models for movies. That's got to start somewhere. Tell me about your first models.
Yeah, so I had a father who's Scottish and Troon, and he was an artist and moved to the States and had a family. Mm-hmm. I have 2 brothers. I'm the baby of the family. I'm like over 6'4", but you know, there I am, baby of the family. Anyway, he encouraged us to be creative, and he encouraged us to draw and paint and everything like this. But the other thing I think he did was he gave us model kits, and I think that was to get us out of his hair, so to speak. So as the younger one,
something to keep you occupied.
Yeah. And but you know, models are great for that, for someone with a creative mind. You've got all these parts, pieces, and you have a goal, which is to put them together and create this finished product. And then so in your head and your imagination, you're flying a Spitfire, or you're flying a Messerschmitt or whatever. But you've got all the pieces in front of you. So to get to that point where you can let your imagination sort of run wild, you've got to get it built. And so that, for me, was a very early part of my development, to see models and see the goal, which was to get them completed and see all the parts. And funny enough, in visual effects, there's a very similar method in terms of creating visual effects, which is you have this goal, which is the final product, and now you have to take it apart. You have to reverse the process, make it into its pieces. Once you've made the pieces, you then go forward again and reassemble them. But you've got that goal in mind, which is going to be the final product. And funny enough, you know, starting out as a child building models, never thought that I would ever be able to use that skill set.
Well, it's a really interesting skill set, because it's not just a creative thing or an artistic thing. It's also an incredibly technical thing as well. Mm-hmm. And you seem to bring those worlds together really clearly. Which leads, do you think?
The creative is the lead, but the creative is a wandering child without the technical. And what's been so great for me is I realized that I had the ability to sort of take the bigger picture and see the broader world view of something like a visual effect sequence. And then by decimating it into smaller pieces, I could find the right people that had the skills to apply them to the particular parts. You know, so I've got craftsmen who are great at sculpting or fabricating pieces. I've got engineers who are brilliant, who technically can build something that can work reliably and tough and blow up and do all these other things. And very few of them, though, I think have the ability to sort of look at the overall picture and be able to fit it all together. But that's okay, because they're specific skill set and then me having the ability to see where they fit into that puzzle and create that team.
So you have the overview and how, not just how all the parts of the miniature fit together, but how all the parts of the team that make the miniature fit together as well. And
it's funny how you can get a team going, and the trick is to find the personalities and not only have the skill set, but have the ability to work together and have that common goal in mind. And if you can inspire them and explain to them what they're striving for, then they keep going in that direction. if you keep information from them, they feel isolated. They don't feel like they're being artists who are contributing to that greater product. So I've also found that over the years. So you need to be inclusive and make them feel part of the team, because they'll give you much more effort if they feel like they're being appreciated as artists, even though they're doing technical things. But a welder is an amazing artist if they're concentrating on doing the perfect weld and doing the perfect metal fabrication. So encouraging technicians, encouraging artists, encouraging craftsmen to apply themselves, you get tenfold the results versus isolating them and saying, you don't need to know any of this, you don't need to know any of this stuff, you just need to do your little part of the job. They want to know what it is that they're working on. They want to contribute. They want to feel, the analogy is, it's funny, we're in for those listening, we're in a church, and there's always the old story about the two bricklayers, that story where the man walks across and there's two guys laying bricks, and first guy is laying bricks, and the man asks, what are you doing? And the guy says, I'm laying bricks. And he goes to the second man, and the second man's got a huge smile on his face, and he's very happy with what he's doing. And he says, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a cathedral.
Right, yeah.
It's the same job, but knowing that this is ultimately you're going to be part of a greater whole makes a huge difference.
It also helps if you know what you're working towards, I
Yes.
guess. Yeah. So in terms of where you end up, lots of people, when they're kids, they build models, and their father sends them off with kit sets to make Messerschmitts. They don't all end up blowing things up for Christopher Nolan. So what is the path that takes you there?
I didn't think it would go that way. I always wanted to work in films. I always loved films. Always, of course, was attracted to special effects right off the bat. Huge fan, my brothers and I, and my father even, of Ray Harryhausen, who is sort of the ultimate special effects practitioner. But I was also very appreciative of a guy named Albert Whitlock, who is lesser known, who worked on Hitchcock movies and things. He was a matte painter. And so while Harryhausen worked in fantasy, Whitlock worked in dramas.
Okay.
And so his work was always hidden. It was always part of the narrative, part of the storytelling. And when I found out that what he did is matte painting, or he'd build little models, he worked on the movie The Hindenburg, and he shot the Hindenburg once in a while. To see his work and realize what he was doing, extending the storytelling, also inspired me. But that's me as a kid. I get out. I, for some reason, think that I can go into aerospace, and so I have the technical.
So was this engineering studies, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I ended up sort of dropping out and not pursuing the aerospace because I was told that, you're not going to build airplanes, and I was like, but that's what I would do. I want to get my hands dirty. And so sort of got disillusioned with the aerospace part, dropped out, got a job building plastic tanks for soaking circuit boards in acid.
Okay.
So I'm working with plastics and chemicals. Awful job. Can't stand it. Got to get out of it. So I actually saw an advert for a model builder. I thought, I used to build models as a kid. I still build models. I've done a little bit of work. I've got some pictures of it. I'm going to apply for this job. It's got to be better than working in plastics and chemicals, which I'm doing now. I go interview. Fantastic. Start Monday. I'm like, oh my God, they must be really impressed with me. And I start working, and there's two other people working with me building models for a movie, and I'm so happy. And there's a girl next to me and a guy next to me, and I say, I'm Ian Hunter, I'm a model maker, and what do you do? And the woman says, well, I'm a student at Cal Arts, which is the art school in California. I said, oh, okay, well, you're an art student, that's great, you're building models, but I'm building models too. And then I look at the guy next to me and I say, I'm Ian Hunter, I'm a model maker, what do you do? And he says, I am Dimitri, I am a ballet artist, and I just got here from Russia. I'm like, oh, they're hiring literally anyone off the street to do this work. So I was a little disillusioned with whole model making. But it turns out I'm pretty good at it. And that movie was The Abyss. It was the very first movie that I sort of professionally worked on.
Wow, and that's legendary for visual effects as well. So it's
and I think it still holds up very well today. And it was a great movie because it combined what we call analog effects, practical miniatures and things like that. But it also had one of the very first digital creations, which was the water tentacle that comes through.
Yeah.
And was very impressive. So a nice sort of initiation to be able to work on a James Cameron film that was respected so well for visual effects.
Absolutely. And so just for clarity, if we're talking about visual effects or we're talking about special effects, what's the difference? How are these things defined?
Special effects primarily relates to actual practical effects that are happening on set. So if you're flipping a car, if there's rain outside the door, if the fire's going on and there's actors involved and you see that, that's special effects. Mm-hmm. Visual effects is a bit broader term. These days it means normally 99% of the time it means digital effects.
Presumably that number is getting bigger.
Yeah. So what I do, which is very niche-y, is miniatures, which is still a visual effect because it's not something you do live on set. It's you're building something smaller than full size, so therefore it's an illusion. It's a visual effect again, that you're trying to make people believe what you're seeing is real, when in fact it's not. But it also involves practical or special effects in that we have to pull it, we have to blow it up, we have to do all those things. So we take all the disciplines that were in practical effects, special effects, which is the live, real stuff, and apply it to the miniatures. And then often what we've shot then goes into visual effects where it's combined with the live action, combined with digital backgrounds, et cetera.
Right.
So I think the best work is a hybrid. When filmmakers have a full toolbox of both special effects and visual effects available to them and can pick and choose and combine them together to create the best illusion. Because I'll often say, no, you should do that digitally, or you should do that as a matte painting. You should put, I'll push people that direction when I think creatively and technically that's a better solution. But I'll also advocate shooting it for real if possible, because real is real.
Right. To what extent does that matter anymore?
The thing is, when you're dealing with, I would say, the superhero movies where you're dealing with, or Transformers, where you're dealing with the suspension of disbelief. You're in a fantasy world. These people really can't fly. They're not really turning into green giants. But you're accepting them anyway. Yep. Then at that point, I think digital animation and all these other things that we're doing in that world are completely acceptable and completely something I can watch the movie and enjoy it. I know it's an effect, but I'm fine with it. Yeah. And it's getting better. The simulations of people and skin and the believability that you're looking at a real character that could not exist in the real world. I buy it. I'm fine with that. Yeah. Where it becomes, I think, different is when you're doing a drama, which is supposed to be set in the real world, and if a digital effect is not perfect in a drama which is supposed to be realistic, it takes you out of the storytelling. It breaks that fourth wall, and you're suddenly realizing subconsciously you're not looking at reality. So it's a higher bar, I think, on a drama to create effects, either practically or digitally, that don't take you out of the story.
Right. To be clear, when you say miniature, the first thing in my mind goes to is something the size of this coffee cup. But when you say miniature, you mean something usually quite more substantial than that.
Yeah, for me, miniature means less than full size. Right. And Weta, who did the Lord of the Rings movies, when they filmed those, they built some models and they built these miniatures that were larger than something that you could fit on a tabletop. These miniatures filled spaces in stages, and so they were, 30 feet across and 16 feet tall, things like that. And they started calling them bigatures. Okay. Oh my God, they're so huge, they're bigatures. Yeah. And I'm like, no, it's still a miniature if it's less than full size. And I actually worked on the movie Waterworld. Right. And we built the Exxon Valdez as a miniature in 1/8 scale. So even though it's a miniature, because it's based on this giant oil tanker, the miniature was 108 feet long and could be seen from space. Yeah. So
So bigger than this coffee cup.
Bigger than this coffee cup, yeah. So what we're doing is, even though it's smaller than full size, we still have to build it large enough to do the effect it has to do.
Right.
If it's involved in water, it needs to be big. If it's going to burn or blow up, it needs to be big enough for the physics to still work.
Because that's a really interesting aspect of this, because there's a lot of physics in what's involved, particularly when you start getting into explosions and trajectories and all those sorts of things. Does the scale, to what extent does the scale matter at that point, whether it's 8th scale or 6th scale or 16th or whatever it might be?
Well, the smaller you get in scale, the higher frame rate you have to go in order to create the illusion of mass and gravity.
Okay.
And basically, my analogy is this: if you were standing there and you had a tennis ball in your outstretched arm, you dropped it. And if you're a normal-sized person, that's about 5 feet in the air, and it's going to take maybe half a second to hit the ground. Okay, everyone knows that subconsciously. That's a person dropping a tennis ball. But if I'm supposed to be a giant 50 feet tall, and I drop that tennis ball, which is like a person or something, and it hits the ground a half a second later, well, yeah, they know I'm not 50
Gravity
feet tall. Gravity's,
yeah.
It's like it should be slowed down. It should take longer for that to hit the ground. So you need to
speed up the camera.
Speed up the camera to create the illusion of mass by slowing down the action. And the bigger the scale, of course, the slower you can get the camera to go and still create the illusion of mass. But the other thing is an issue, which is, especially with water, is the size of water droplets. Water has a certain surface tension, and it's really hard to change that. Use a different material, hit it with air. You can do some tricks to break that apart, but again, subconsciously, a person looks at that, and if the drops are too big, they know they're looking at something that's not full size. So in the case of water work, we tend to build the miniatures much larger, and then when you start getting into fire, you can get away with a little bit smaller. When you start blowing things up, because you're adding force, you're adding the explosive energy is actually moving things at a greater rate than would happen with gravity. You can actually start getting smaller in scale. So for instance, we did a movie called Godzilla where we had to blow up the Chrysler building, and that was 24th scale. So a person would be about 3 inches tall, but we were able to build that model, which was still 16 feet tall, but we were using pyrotechnics to blow it up, and it looks correct in scale because we were shooting at the right frame rate and the explosives were the correct size and they looked slowed down because we were shooting at the frame rate. So it's all dependent on the physics. It's all dependent on what the function's going to be and then experience.
One of the things that for me really communicates the mass and the scale of something that has been made smaller but is designed to look big is the sound and the music and those sorts of things. How closely do you work with that?
Interestingly, I don't get to work with the sound department very much. I would hope that they are looking at something that's convincing them that they're looking at something real, so they'll apply their skills to that. I do work with the editors quite a bit because editors sometimes have a tendency to look at visual effects as sort of this red-headed stepchild part of the industry, and so they just want to sort of cut this thing in, and they don't realize that it's part of your film, it's part of the storytelling. So pick the right part of the scene, or pick the right part of the shot that works and tells the story. So I tend to shoot things longer than necessary to give them the flexibility to find the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So editors are more important. But here's a funny story. So I worked on a Disney movie, and one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and we shot this miniature wagon. And it's supposed to be Johnny Depp is pulling this wagon through, and they never got the shot, so we shot this wagon. It was on fire, but we built it in quarter scale, so the fire held up. And we got it done, and they went to editorial, and the supervisor said, "Okay, did you cut in the miniature shot yet?" And the editor said, "Oh, no, we found a live action shot. We put that in instead." And then the supervisor looked and said, "Oh, no, that's the miniature shot." So the editors didn't even realize that they were getting a special effects shot. We had done a good enough job to fool them. If we fool them, then we've done
That's
our
quite
work.
convincing. And the list of films that you've worked on is, as far as visual effects goes, pretty substantial and pretty impressive. I mean, obviously Inception, the Batman films, Christopher Nolan ones, and now you have an Oscar.
Oh, yes.
You want to tell me a little bit about that?
I have 2 Oscars, actually. So
I apologize.
It's okay. I know this. Getting an Oscar to me is Richard Branson's definition of luck, which is Branson was asked, did you feel lucky being a billionaire, or whatever he's worth these days, and he said, well, luck to him was when perseverance meets opportunity. So I've been in this business for a long time. I've always strived to do a good job. I don't want to cheat people on what I'm providing them. I'm an audience member, so I want to look at my work as an audience member and do a good job, be impressed by it. So I've been very fortunate over the years to work with some good directors and great directors, and Christopher Nolan's one of them. And by maintaining that quality of work, you start to move up, and you can start to get noticed for what you've done. And it culminated in the work for Interstellar, where we got the Visual Effects Academy Award for that, along with the other 3 supervisors. So that was great, but that, to me, that was like, okay, well, this is because we've all worked towards the same goal, which is to do good quality work, and we've maintained that quality throughout the years, and now we're being recognized for it. And then very quickly, on the heels of that, I worked on First Man, and First Man, again, was another film that received the Visual Effects Academy Award, and I got one of those too. So now I've got 2 for doing space movies. I don't want to be typecast, but both instances, which was good, was we were working with great directors who had visions and who could communicate those visions to their crews, and who had that respect. So I think it's just this convergence. Christopher Nolan's made good movies. I happen to work on some of them. Damien Chazelle's made good movies. I work on his last one. It's, they're brilliant movies, in my opinion, but they're brilliant movies, they're good movies, and these guys encourage good artists to do good work, and I think that's just people finally recognize that.
What's really interesting to me is the difference of approach of those, specifically those 2 films in space. One of them being shot against a black background, and one of them being shot against this incredibly huge screen that you'd built, I guess, to sort of provide the realistic reflections and so on.
Yeah. So Interstellar, actually, there were projectors. We used digital projectors on front screen material for outside the windows of the spaceships.
Okay.
So whenever you were looking through the windows and the actors were there, they were actually looking at space being generated there. So Interstellar also is a film that there's only one green screen shot in the whole film. The rest of it was either done in camera as much as possible, or in the case of our spaceships, we shot against black and then used digital rotoscoping abilities to isolate the models and put the space backgrounds in. But that kept the images very pure, and we didn't get spill and all these other things. So it was worth the effort because the purity of the images that were being created. In the case of First Man, it was only a few years difference between Interstellar and First Man, but by then technology had advanced enough that we now could take the LED screens and create the giant wall of LED screens that was 60 foot by 30 foot tall, 60 foot wide, that we could put the spaceships against. And that was used primarily for the full-size mock-ups and cockpits. So again, you're looking out the window and you're seeing the images, and the actors are able to react to it. We were doing one take where they were shooting the landing of the moon, and Ryan Gosling's looking out the window, and the camera operator was like, what's he looking at? And was able to pan over and look out the window also. So having the images there informs the actors, informs the performances, but also informs the operation of the camera operator and everybody else. Just having that image there, as opposed to just having a green screen and filling it in after the last minute. So it's very important. It really affected the shoot. The trick doing that is, if you just have a green screen, you can add it in post.
Yeah.
when you have that LED screen there and you have to have it in camera, that means you have to create the effects before photography starts.
Of course, yeah, sure.
So that was it was a very front end loaded movie to do that, and it only would have worked because Damien was very prepared and he had storyboards and created this environment, this scenario that he could shoot those backgrounds in camera as much as possible. Funny enough, most of the miniature work we did on that, we also shot against black, very much like we did in Interstellar. And then DNEG, who also did the work on Interstellar, removed any of the model movers and any of the rigging it showed and just put it against a pure black background. Interestingly enough, because we were trying to be very realistic in First Man, if you look at the actual footage that was we were matching, oftentimes if you're facing the sun in space, you see no stars because they're blown out by the sunlight. So sometimes we would have stars in the backgrounds, but oftentimes we would just be in the black void, which would be very realistic for the photography.
Okay. And I guess that your career, particularly with the kinds of films that you've ended up working on, and I'm thinking here of the Batman films, for instance, you spend months making something and then see it destroyed in seconds and then, I guess, start all over again. What's that like?
Batman has been an interesting world for me because I actually worked on Batman Returns, which was the Tim Burton sequel.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then that's great. At the time it wasn't as well received. Now it's sort of considered the Citizen, or certainly
the
better.
Citizen Kane of Batman.
Citizen Kane of Batman.
What you were going to say? Yeah.
And then that's great. And then I got to work on Batman and Robin, which is not the Citizen Kane of Batman movies. Sure. And we're proud of the work, but man, the movie was not. We called it Batman on Ice, which was not very good. So it's like down low. And then Christopher Nolan comes along and does Dark Knight, and we get asked to work on that and Dark Knight Rises. And so we sort of got redeemed from the Batman and Robin world. And I was told by the supervisor on Dark Knight that we were never to mention Batman and Robin, and that was verboten. So, just wanted to forget about that. But here's the funny thing about what we do. I mean, we're storytellers. We're creating these images that are going to, convey something that's happening, destruction or, some sort of pivotal moment in the story. And so we're building these models, but these models are sort of like, lack of a better term, they're part of a performance art piece, if you will. Yeah. They're created to be destroyed. They're creating them specifically to put them into this scenario and into this event, and we're capturing that phenomenon with cameras. And so we want to see how it blows up and
so I guess
it destroys.
The film is the cathedral and not the miniature.
Yeah, and that's the difference too. Is I've worked with people who are like obsessed with the model and think that and like, don't touch my precious model, and like, no, you don't understand. It's a means to an end. My mentor, a guy named Mark Stetson, who was a supervisor who I sort of worked with for many years, taught me that very early on. He says the model is just what
how you get there.
That's how we get there.
Yeah.
It's what we put on the screen that's going to be the lasting piece. And so if we build the fortress for Inception and it's supposed to be destroyed and we don't do it, well, then it's not karma has not been fulfilled. It's now this sad thing that like wants to be destroyed and reborn, and if we don't destroy it, it's meaningless.
That's an incredibly impressive construction. That is it. One of the things that you point to go, I did that. That was me.
Yeah. That was for New Deal Studios, which is our company. It was the largest model we built. It was 47 foot tall, huge miniature, mountainside, and we were very involved in designing the sequence in terms of how it fell apart and how it broke up, and working in the previs. So it's satisfying to be at the genesis of that, to work out the creative aspect of it and then do all the technical and finally pull off the shot.
Is the kid making models at a young age happy with where he's ended up?
Here's the unfortunate thing. I mentioned my father, who was an artist, and he taught my brothers and I to be our own worst critics. A really true artist will always look at his work or her work and say, well, what could I do better? What could I have done, somewhat better? So funny enough, as much as I've done all these movies, and yes, gotten awards, and yes, recognition, and yes, the work is good and great, and my people did fantastic, I often still look at the work and think, what could I have done better? What could we do to improve that? Or,
What's your next opportunity to do that?
Another space movie, but one I'm going to have a lot less pressure on. It's going to be I can't say the title or talk too much about the plot, but it's going to be a rom-com set in space.
Okay, nice.
So that is going to be like pure fun, actually, and kind of a relief to be able to just
Hopefully something blows up.
About every 5 minutes something blows up. So that'll be fun.
Ian, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Cheers. That's Ian Hunter, and that's the MTF podcast. If you enjoyed that, and you've heard podcasts before, so you know what to do by now, subscribe, share, like, rate, and review. Maybe even go back and listen to a few earlier episodes as well while you're at it, or just tell someone you know. As you may have heard, we're in Örebro next week running AI labs and an MTF trackathon in residence at the university there, bringing some brilliant MTFers from all around the world to invent the future of intelligent machines with humans in the loop. And if you didn't know that, then chances are that's because you're not subscribed to our newsletter. It's absolutely free, no reason not to join, and you'd be an excellent company. Pretty much everyone ever featured on this podcast are all signed up. Just go to musictechfest.net/newsletter, and I'll leave you to go and do that. Have a great week, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.